All right. Uh, what I had envisioned happening this evening, and I hope we can follow this, and if so, we'll be kind of out of the barn here pretty soon. You can get back to your whatever else you're doing. The first thing is just to check in to see where you are. I got your materials. I got the assignment pieces. I kind of looked through the forum piece just to figure, kind of see where you're going there. And I discovered how my directions could have been clearer, and we'll clarify that in the next version. But the idea was to use that forum session as a way of getting into the assignment piece. And in the forum, you would throw ideas around. Different people have different ideas. You'd settle on one, and then that would be the one that you would develop the learner-centered problem statement from. And by and large, I think that's where you ended up. But the method you used to get there, I guess I could have been more precise about the directions for that. The all of this kind of leads into looking at that transition point, or that some people call it an inflection point, where you go from thinking about what is the problem the student or the learner is having to what are the issues in policy and practice that are causing that to happen. And one reason that we included, and I think Jen does a wonderful job in talking about the path analysis stuff, the root cause sort of thing, which is a spinoff of path analysis. But hopefully you had a chance to look at that. And if you did, you would have, and if you haven't, yeah, you really need to look at that, because that is a key sort of concept, because the first half of the equation is figuring out what's not happening for the learners. And then the second half of the equation is to determine, what is the policy piece or the practice piece or whatever it is that's creating that problem or that is responsible for that problem. And then what do we do to fix it? Or what data will tell us what we need to do to fix it. And so it is that movement from thinking strictly through the eyes of what's the student or the parents or whatever not getting, to the sort of more practitioner eyes of saying, okay, well, what about our current policy? What about our current practices is creating the issue? And then you can get about thinking about, okay, well, what do we need to do to change that? What can we do to fix it, or what's available? But the role that data plays in that process is helping you figure out what it is that is the problem, either in policy or practice, that's making that learner problem exist. And you always have to start, we kind of start with an idea that, okay, if kids are having problems at school, or if the school's not being successful, then teachers' first fallback position, or the school community's first fallback position is, well, it's got to be the parents. And yeah, it could be. Parents are always a problem, a part of the mix, or guardianship or family structure or whatever. Those are always part of the mix. But you always have to first ask the question, is there anything that we're doing in school, either by policy and or the practice that flows out of the policy, that's making some of that happen, or at least contributing to those learner problems happening? And that's the real role of, that's the important piece of data in this whole thing, is to help make that inflection point. And then once you decide what to do, then what's the data that you can collect to tell you whether that's successful or not? And so data is always the kind of an informative piece, an advisory piece. It's not the thing that makes the decision, but it does help you slide from that side of thinking about, okay, well, what's bad for the students to, okay, what can we do, or what do we need to fix policy or practice wise? And so that's the, the kind of the point we're trying to get to. So, the next, the piece that you've done so far, and I'm reading those and I'll get those back to you tomorrow. If all, creeks don't rise and, I'll wake up in the morning. But what I'll do, maybe that's too definite, I don't know, probably tomorrow. But the, that is sort of the piece we're working on right now. How do you go from that learner-centered problem to that problem of practice? And what role does data play in telling us what that might be? In one of the school turnarounds, it was kind of interesting that that I was engaged in a few years ago. We were looking at a little small feeder system over in the north corner of Virginia, right next to West Virginia. But it's a small county, and our large county, and this one school feeder system is over in one corner of the county, right in the mountains or button up into the mountains, and it's very rural, and it's a very probably not many college degrees in that part of the county and things like that. And it was a high school, a middle school, and 3 elementary schools. The entire system, 3 elementaries feeding 1 middle, feeding 1 high school over in this one corner of this county. And there were like 4 sections of the county. This was just one section of it. And we're working on it because the school had been consistently scoring fairly low on standardized tests, and the hope and the idea was we can do something about this. And so when they got their grant and then the turnaround team came in, I was always the data guy, and I was the guy that collected all the records and the files and ran all the data and tried to give them some idea of what the problems were or help them define the problems. We didn't tell the teachers what they needed to do and what the schools they needed to do. We let them determine that, but we provided all the data and advice that we could. And it was interesting because once you looked at, part of the issue was that there was great disparity, even more so than you would expect, in the students coming out of the 3 elementary schools. 2 of them were, relatively large. Actually, there were 4. There were 2 were relatively large, and 2 were real tiny. But one of the real tiny ones did really well, but the other real tiny one was so far different in all of our metrics from the other elementaries. We thought, well, we'll take a look at this and see if we can figure out what's going on here. And so I looked at all the records, and the only factor that was a significant predictor of success in that school was whether the mother of enrolling these kids in this elementary school, whether the mother had a high school diploma or not. Didn't matter whether the dad did. That was kind of irrelevant in terms of the significant differences. But there was a big, huge difference on student success coming out of the 5th grade of the elementary school on when they enrolled and they did all the, they fill out all the forms and all the records and all. One of the pieces of data that you always collect is, father's educational level and mother's educational level. And the only predictor was if the mother's educational level was a non-high school graduate. And we thought, that's really strange. Let's go look even closer. And so when we began matching these records to schools, there was an uncommon number of them, much more than we were expected, in this one teeny tiny little school. And so their kids were coming out and they were scoring way, way, way below the other elementaries. And so that was part of the issue. And by the time they got to the high school level, after going through middle school, they were still a couple of grades behind in terms of math in particular. And so, we kind of said there's really two projects here. One, at the high school, we need to work on math instruction. We need to make the assumption that there's great disparities and big gaps in students' readiness and all that. And so we plotted the teachers thought through and spent the summer planning. We worked out some strategies that they were going to employ in the math classrooms, which made a big difference. And at the same time, we went back to the elementary school, the one that had scored so low, and we convinced the county library services to locate a mobile library over there, pretty much full time. So there would be reading material for the adults in the community, and for the school system to do, and the school to do outreach to the adults and say, this is what we have, and that sort of thing. And also put a GED program over there at that one elementary school. And you would be amazed how tight that one little elementary school got in terms of a community once they saw the county willing to spend resources just to help them gain a little bit more education or get the degree they hoped they had, or eventually we started offering virtual class, or not virtual at that time, but it was the hybrid video classes, from different community colleges, so they could even get an associate's degree there in some of the diploma areas. And so it was an interesting sort of model in terms of here are all the pieces that came to play in figuring out part of the reason this high school was scoring so low. And so once we figured it out and we changed some policies and we put some different things in place, and we put extra aides in that one school, a couple of extra aides. They're not terribly expensive, so the school system could do that pretty easily. 3 years later, by end of 3 years later, of course, this elementary thing didn't have any impact on that, but the end of 3 years later, we had them scoring at the state average on the standardized test. And that was not untypical what would happen if you go in one of these turnaround modes. But the idea was that they're all data driven, and you use the data to help you understand how to go from what you think is a student problem or a learning problem or a climate problem or whatever, to what are policies and practices that we need to look at, to kind of solve that problem. And so that's really kind of the notion, is we're trying to make that move over and make that connection between, learning problems and practice and policy. So that's the end of my piece. I'd really like to find out if you have any questions about that, or where you think you're going in terms of these projects. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm more than willing to meet, with a group by Zoom or individually with people. That's fine. That's we need to figure out what we have to accomplish to get to the end of the process here. And so I guess the question is, where are you, and how do you feel about where you are?
Dr. Bolt, my question would be is, are there going to be additional modules posted?
Yes, they will go up tomorrow.
Okay.
I played with those today, got most of the dates squared away, but obviously I'm not doing as well with that as I would like. So I'm going to go check them again and make sure that I don't have incompatible dates, two different places and all that good stuff. We'll go up tomorrow, yes. But it's actually just from really here on out, except up until the next time we meet, which is like the very last week of the class. Here on out, it is resource material and information that you need to finish these projects off, along with some due dates and timelines, so that I can get some feedback fed to you fairly quickly as we go through that. And so, the modules that are coming up, and there are three more, I think, are all materials that would help you kind of work through this project stuff, because we want you to feel comfortable going back into a school setting and being able to, kind of engage in this sort of thing and feel comfortable doing it. Questions, comments? I'm here. Not for long, then. Yeah, I mean, and I do encourage you, and I don't take this as just the typical blowing smoke thing. If you need a face-to-face or a one-on-one, and you want to ask your specific questions, or a group on one thing, we'll do a Zoom meeting. We'll just organize it and put it together, and work with your schedule and my schedule and figure it out. It's not like I'm going anywhere. I'm kind of rooted here. I'm in a little bit of a quarantine period now because I may have encountered some folks that may have encountered some folks. So, but I feel fine. So, I think we're okay. But, you got to follow the rules, stay within the lines. So I'm in kind of in that quarantine point right now for another week or so. And then my wife probably won't let me leave the house after that anyhow. We'll be here for the rest of the thing. But had to hit a deadline, had to get a report in, had to get some data run. So
I think once the modules open up and we can actually see this stuff, I think the questions will come in. But until we're able to see that, I think right now we have questions, or at least I do, but I just don't know what they are yet until I see that.
Let me add this piece before you see them, before they come up. One is really the description of those that's in the syllabus, and any of the material you'll have will not be different from what you'll see once the modules come up. And so they're all feeding into sort of this final project piece, and they're all designed to kind of help you get there. And the only one that really is the important piece in terms of making sure that you hit the mark with that one 100% is the final project. Everything up to that is a draft. So these PowerPoints that I'm looking at now, literally they're a draft, but they become a part of the final project, which will be a little bit more. Yeah, they'll go up tomorrow. I'll get them up tomorrow. I'm pretty close. I'm leery now of popping those up without checking the dates 3 and 4 times, and because those same links show up 4 different places in the course, it's kind of crazy. But I have some critiques of the modules, and for when we review this thing at the end of the semester. But I'll save those for that group. Nothing else? All right, I'll pop those up. I'll get you feedback on the PowerPoints. You see the modules, you see the things, the outlines, things that are due. If you have questions or we need to talk or go back and forth, whatever, email, Zoom, I'm here. Captive audience. Literally. All right, folks. Good night. Have a